Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's vOLTHA TST meeting. Thanks for joining. As usual, the call is public and recorded. Will be shared live on YouTube somewhat later today. And so be mindful of the comments you make, and they're going to be public. So first up is just a small update from everybody involved in the team around the minor software upgrade of vOLTHA and ONOS. Currently, we're focusing on the ONOS side. There's a few things that we have already done. I myself personally took on the extrapolation of the OLT pipeline driver from ONOS and moved it to the OLT pipeline app. And that is so that a change in the OLT pipeline application flow objectives would not require a change in ONOS, but it would keep it contained to the OLT app itself, because might have needed to change the pipeline driver, and that's now included in the app itself. So you're going to just have to reinstall the application. Thanks to some great contribution from Netsia, we actually just saw two patches coming in from SADIS and IGMP proxy applications to do some of the changes that were required to allow the minor software upgrade, as we have talked the other time. So as you can see, this one was merely in the POM XML files, while the one for IGMP proxy is a little bit more convoluted, and it's a perfect example of what needed to be done. Apart from the changes in the pom.xml, which, as we know, extrapolate the API version extrapolate the API version of the app instead of the project version of the app as it was used before. There's also a change in the ONOS application requirements. This is because the apps in ONOS have a way of depending on one another at runtime, so that they are loaded, so that the services are found, and they're automatically loaded. But this also works on deactivation, so that would cause an issue, because the deactivation of an app would deactivate all the dependents, the required app as well. So that's it's not something we want. And also very important, we had to change the reference of the services to from a mandatory to a dynamic, to allow absence of these services for a certain amount of time. And that's also why we had to make a few null pointer exception checks when the multicast service is actually used, or the SADIS service, to make sure that we are not hitting a null pointer when we call things. And this is to allow the apps that contain these services to go away and come back effectively. So these are the changes that were done. Also not clearing some of the maps so that the app can relearn the data from atomics. There's going to be more of these patches. I just saw Elida uploaded the one from multicast. So this is how it's going to be done for the ONOS apps. I encourage everybody to take a look at them if you're interested in the differences within the apps. And to test this, Hardik started putting together a test for our Jenkins infrastructure, where we are now basically doing verification of functionality of after a minor version change of an application. So the test is there. I'm not going to go over it right now, but please do take a look at it. It's still work in progress, and maybe Hardik can comment more on it if you have any questions. But the idea would be to swap out the apps and do it for each of the apps, and just make sure that we have everything working after and before and after effectively. There is one thing that we need to take into account and we need to be aware of. Some of the changes that I was talking about with the application not depending on one another anymore is fine, because our readiness probe in Kubernetes for ONOS actually checks that all the apps are actually present through an ONOS API. That has the downside that we need to somewhat find a way to stop that liveliness check during the time of the ONOS app update, because in that case, the liveliness check will not be true. So that's something that we will have to work on at ONF. It's something we will have to take care. But the pieces are going or fitting in very nicely. So a huge thanks to Netsia for contributing these patches. And we are progressing forward on this front on the ONOS software upgrade. I also know that Hardik started taking a look at having a more explicit version of the component restart test for including it into including a binary version change of vOLTHA components. Another step that I also know we are working on this is for the OpenONU adapter. Holger is putting together the patches that are needed to achieve the MDS check upon restart of the component, and thus not having a functionality impacting reprovision of the ONU. So things are going fairly well from a software update perspective. Before I go on, any questions?
Andrea.
Yeah, go ahead, Mahir.
Yeah, as a status, there are probably 4 or 5 other applications that should be upstreamed, and Elida, I think, will upstream them in a few days.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for that. I'm also working with her and Tunahan because I'm in the change I mentioned here to the OLT app to include the OLT pipeliner. There were some changes that had to be done to the structure of the app itself. So on that one, we might need some rebasing of your existing changes, but I'll work with them to get them upstreamed. And we know what needs to be done, so it should be fairly simple to pour them on these OLT app. My plan is then to have a release of vOLTHA ONOS without any of these changes, meaning the app API version changes, and then have a major release of vOLTHA ONOS updated with these patches, so that we are having them all within one build, effectively. Probably before that, I'm just going to go ahead and create a vOLTHA ONOS patch to be tested, and we should have finished the app update test by then, so we can go ahead and then actually test all of this. This is great work, by the way. Thanks a lot for taking it on, and thanks also to Hardik for the test. This is great stuff, guys. Any other questions for the group on the topic of the app update? No. One comment. This also includes the fact that we cannot do storage update, format of data stored changes, meaning that is considered an API change within an application. So if you change a Java class that gets stored in atomics, that's considered an API change. That's something that I remembered in a discussion today, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Okay, so next up, there's the storage discussion that's going on a lot, I think, and we have put together a document, thanks to David, I believe, for the requirements on our storage. So I'd like to go through that, but also there's some update from Serkant around the work that he has done on the Redis integration that I would like to get to, and a few discussions over there. So let's start with the storage. David, was this your document?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, I'll let you take it on then.
Okay, really what I tried to call out here are idea or points that we need to think about as we evaluate storage, and in particular as we evaluate storage, we look at it kind of holistically. So the first is scope, and scope really refers to a relationship between a data store and a stack. Are we going to have one-to-one, one stack, one data store, or are we going to have a one-to-n, each essentially a single data store to cover all stacks within a region, if you will? I mean, I suspect there's still some demarcation that we need to think about. But depending on what we want to do, that can influence how we make decisions around data store. And it also means it has implications on deployment and other things. I did not, in a lot of these areas, come to conclusions. It's like, these are things we need to think about. Data consistency, we've talked about this before. Where do we need strong consistency versus eventual consistency? What are the boundaries of that? If we have in our code a single entry point for data that is authoritative for that data, in other words, all reads and writes the data go through that piece of code, and that code is isolated from other bits of the data store, well, then eventual consistency might work as kind of a read through cache. If we are using the database to essentially pass data or share data between processes, then strong consistency is required. So again, just a thought process on that. We need to understand that changing from one model to the other model is not something to be done lightly in either direction. Next section. I can't control this. There we go. Thank you. Transaction rates. Straightforward enough. How, do we have any requirements around transaction rates? How many actual transactions, reads, writes per second are we expecting? Again, a lot of this and a lot of the other concepts here depend on scope. In other words, if it's a one-to-one relationship, there'll be the transaction rate will be less. If it's a one-to-n relationship between KV stores and stacks, there'll be more transactions. Concurrent client transactions. Do we expect the number of clients to hit the database to be a single client hitting the database or 12 clients hitting the database? Just needs to be defined. Resource utilization. We talked about the data store memory usage, and believe me, I agree, it seems very strange and too large. But we've actually never said what we expect from our data store, at least not that I'm aware, right? And so if we are going to be evaluating databases, some of this needs to be specified. What are requirements in terms of CPU disk memory for a data store? Multiple data classifications. Talk about this a little bit too. One data store does not necessarily meet all our data needs, or might not necessarily meet all our needs. If we're doing time series data, then a KV store type data store is absolutely the wrong thing. If we require lots of queries, filtering, a KV store might not be the right thing. Those things have to be considered, right? The right data store for the right usage. Trying to fit the square data store in the round hole just won't work. And then I talk about other capabilities, and this is where I talk about the need to provide filtering, queries, paging on top of our data. And as we talked about this before, it can be provided in many ways. Today it's provided client side. It could be provided server side via code as well. My personal opinion is that if we really believe we need these capabilities, again, my personal opinion is we do, then we need to look to rely on the database to do it. writing anything outside the database. Again, personal opinion is just rewriting what database code does, and that seems a mistake. Again, personal opinion. And then, of course, backup, restore, and snapshot. How do we back up, snapshot this data? Again, this plays heavily into the one-to-one or one-to-n relationship between data stores and stacks. If we have a one-to-one relationship, that means any backup, restore, snapshot capability is going to be happening per stack versus being able to back up a single data store and restore a single data store. So again, things to consider when we talk about scope. So that's kind of briefly, as I said, I wasn't going to come to any conclusion about KV store versus relational versus NoSQL. It was really just, if we're going to evaluate our data storage needs, then I think we need to take a step back a little bit and think about some of the bigger picture stuff rather than just select and go. There you go. Comments, thoughts?
Well, it looks very good, and I think fairly concise, but deep, but to the point. So on the scope point, that was exactly one of the questions that I had on the discussion later for the Redis implementation, because it seems that Turk Telecom but prefers the choice of one Redis cluster per stack, given the amount of usage and memory and stuff like that. They seem to be more happy with one per stack. One consideration that I have on this topic is that it's also maybe and possibly an operator's decision how to deploy this. And some of this might also possibly be dependent on hardware, software, hardware capabilities. So it might not
And I
be
think there are
one
ways to
size
work with
fits
that.
all.
But there's ways to work with that. It depends if we consider this store an internal implementation detail or something that the operator has access to. If this is an internal implementation issue and we choose to do one-to-one, then it's one-to-one. If the operator needs that data in some other format, then it becomes a data export issue, right? So it depends how we consider this KV store. I don't think it's always something like this is necessarily going to be an operator decision. It's gonna, because again, if we design this to say, look, it works with one-to-one, an operator can't go install, one-to-n and expect it to function.
Agreed.
By the way, the reason we have gone for one-to-one was the performance issue that we had in list functions, in Redis. So now I think we make some change for that to get the lists from the memory, not in the database. So we may, try also one-to-n for Redis. So it's not, what I'm trying to say, the one-to-one relation was not a choice. We had to do it.
Understood. And understood. And that's where I kind of hint at, the right database for the right thing. If list functions are a key aspect of what we need, then Redis or etcd may not be the choice that we need, because neither of those are, exceptional at list handling.
Let's go one by one on the topics in the document and put a few sentences as requirements. For example, for consistency, I think we need consistency for some kind of the data in the that we use, especially the resource manager in the OLT adapter needs consistency, I think.
Strong consistency.
Yeah, but on the other hand, in adapters And vCore, we have only one instances of adapters or core per stack. And I think we only have one point of entry to the database. So, and this is another, this may be the alternative for having a strong consistency, you know.
Agreed. If there's a single point of entry to the database for a slice of data,
Yeah.
then yeah, you can absolutely get away with a eventually consistent database, because strong consistency is essentially applied through that entry point, a read-write cache, a read-through cache.
Yes.
We just have to be aware of those points where we have that capability versus, as you said, in the resource manager, where we don't have it.
I think we have it, and also Redis had it on the other side, because Redis, you make your queries, I think, on the master Redis, so you don't make the queries for any of the Redis at the same time. So it's the single entry points for the Redis also.
One question that I have on this
Right.
is, what if the entry point fails at the same time of one of our services? Meaning, the OLT adapter goes down. It wrote to the master of etcd, of Redis, so single entry point.
This is an
That
exception.
instance. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
It's an exceptional case, of course, but I mean, the important point is, if an adapter goes down, how long does it take to come back and be operational? So will data still not be consistent in that time?
Well, the issue would be is if the software that's providing consistency goes down. Again, it's an edge case, right? It's possible that the transaction gets interrupted, or something, that we don't get the database written before the code goes down. So yeah, there's a case where the data in the store, in the persistent store, is going to be different than what the data would have been through the read-write cache. In other words, the client said to the read-write cache, he thinks it's got a consistent update, but before it was written to the database, the client crashed, and now the data it thinks was written wasn't. So there's an inconsistency. That can happen with anything, but it is an edge case.
Yep.
So I'm not sure that's something that we're going to solve on either data store.
So for the etcd use case, if the master etcd fails, probably the requests would be timed out because of the timeout mechanisms that we are using to connect to the etcd. So actually, what would happen if the etcd master fails? The requested data cannot be retrieved from the database, and the request probably would fail. For the Redis case, I think master and a standby path would become faster than the etcd. A new master would be elected faster than the etcd, and the request probably would not fail. But there's a probability that it can get a wrong data. So if you ask me which is better, probably getting the wrong data is not the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are edge cases with both etcd and Redis, right? And the recovery from them is going to be interesting.
I have a question. It's Here we are stating that the resource manager and vOLTHA adapter needs strong consistency. Do you know exactly why do we need strong consistency?
So Girish might know more, but the idea is that there are a couple of objects that the OpenOLT adapter allocates, especially Gemport ID and TCON mapping. Is that correct, Girish? Help me out here. Yeah, okay, perfect. So Gemport ID and TCON mapping, if those are not saved in a strong, consistent fashion, we might get into a situation where we assign different IDs to the Gemports or reuse existing allocated Gemport IDs, and that could lead to traffic failures.
And that's would happen only if we have multiple instances of the vOLTHA, right?
No.
It's for the same instance of the OLT. No, but even if it's eventual consistency and we go through a single instance of the KV store, I don't think this issue should happen. So basically, you get the resource pool, you allocate a resource ID from that resource pool, and you commit back the resource pool back to the KV store. And the next ONU is going to fetch that resource pool to allocate the next available resource ID. If we don't have a strongly consistent KV store, it's possible that the next ONU gets the same resource ID. So
can all this be done in memory, like with rightful cache, or is it that's not an option?
What happens if adapter restarts?
Doing ONU provisioning.
Yeah, so this was, all this could be done in memory, but the only problem that we had was resiliency. If the adapter were to restart, we didn't want to disrupt the data path.
So two things have to happen at the same time, right? The adapter need to be restarted, and the Redis master need to be started to have this edge case.
Yeah.
At the same time, you mean?
Yeah, maybe at the same time, maybe a node crashes and all of the pods are drained to other nodes. So yeah, this could happen at the same time.
Yeah, but eventual consistency is not a problem, as Sarkant was also saying that if we reach the KV store only through one, if we talk to the KV store only through the master node, then it's not a problem. If you're trying to hit any node on the KV store, then eventual consistency is a problem. But if you're trying to go through only the master, then I don't think it's an issue.
So all reads and writes are going through a single node.
Yeah, then
Yes.
I don't think it's a problem. We can still live with eventual consistency. I think Redis is
the issue would be in that case, if the master goes down, and as pointed out, I can't remember by who, the master goes down, then the next read could get the wrong data.
Yeah. I was asking in the last call if Sarkant had a chance to test that case, and did he observe any anomaly? Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't able to test it yet. Still,
This is something that we could.
I promise this week.
It's just a sanity thing in the sense of let's say the adapter goes down and the data has some inconsistency in the database, and the adapter comes back up and start to look at the Gemports and alloc IDs. If it finds something that has already been allocated, can it just raise a flag, or that's not an option?
Sorry, Ken, I lost you there. Can you repeat, please?
Yes. Yeah.
What I'm saying is that assume the data in the database, there was some restart that happened, and the data is not 100% consistent in the database. like maybe the master went down of Redis, for example. Then the adapter comes back up and starts to load the data and memory. It should be able to detect that there are maybe 2 alloc IDs that have been reused. And if it raises an alarm or whatever at that time, would that be enough, or that's not an option?
In order to do that, it should fetch used Gemport IDs, alloc IDs, and ONU IDs somewhere, and check the difference with the resource manager pool in the database. I don't know if there is a place that we can pull Gemport IDs that are in use, or ONU IDs that are in use.
Is there, when you find a difference, who do you believe? Do you always believe the database, or do you always believe the other thing?
Well, we have to believe what is on the device.
Well, the problem is, I don't think we can get it from the device. We could probably get it from a software layer above the device, but then you're back to the who do you believe situation. I'd love it if we could get everything from the device, because then we could potentially get rid of the data store. But
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to pull from the device either. I mean, I talked about this in one of the last calls. Not all devices may support, easy to use APIs to pull such information. But I would like to believe the DB if possible.
And that's one of the reasons people use databases, right? Is to have this faith in the data.
But the data of the resource manager, the IDs that are used are in somewhere in database, somewhere else. I mean, the ONU IDs are in the device structure, the Gemport IDs in technology profile instances. So you may look up all of the data in the database and retrieve these IDs, but again, which one do you trust? I don't know.
Yeah.
Should those allocations, that's a wild idea, like should those allocations be done maybe by an off-bound system, so they will always have
that's exposing too many details of the underlying stuff that we had decided not to do in vOLTHA as of today. So that's not the abstraction we are exposing, Ken.
I understand that, but I think we're moving towards the direction of exposing even more stuff.
Yeah, maybe, but that's not the discussion we need to have right now. So maybe, as David pointed out in a few other times, maybe for a future we could expose some of those properties, but not at this point in time, not with the existing time frame. So I think it seems that on this point, it's really about understanding if we can live with eventual consistency testing a few cases where we drop stuff. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, Girish, this only happens at ONU provisioning time. Is that correct?
Could also be happen maybe in flow provisioning time, I believe.
What provisioning, Andrea, you said?
I said ONU provisioning, meaning ONU discovery.
No, yeah, as Sarkan said, during flow provisioning as well. Okay. During ONU provisioning, we get the ONU ID, but when we provision the subscriber on this ONU, then we allocate the resources, jump ID.
Yeah, my concern here is we don't let the tail wag the dog. What are our requirements? Then we choose a data store that fits those requirements. We don't choose a data store and then see if we can make it work based on the capabilities of the data store. That's my concern. So what are our requirements first, and then choose a data store?
Okay, but the fact is that we did have a data store, and we feel now it's not good enough because it doesn't perform well when we persist it.
And I'm not arguing.
And so, yeah, but the thing is persistence even a requirement?
Well, that's a different discussion.
Well, if it wasn't, then etcd is just fine. You know, it's working for us at 10,000 ONUs. And maybe
Well, no,
Netsia has
actually-
tried earlier.
Well,
You've
hold
tried.
on, hold on, sir.
Saurav, I don't agree with that, because it's also have problems when you don't use the persistency, because it's take all, as we talked before, it takes all snapshots in its memory, and
Right,
its memory
okay.
goes very big.
Okay. So that's memory is the other issue. Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
Right, and right. So again, I'm not arguing that etcd is the right choice. I'm saying we figure out what our requirements are and then make a choice. I don't want to say let's make a choice and then figure out how to make it work with what we're doing. That's all I'm suggesting. That's the direction.
So as part of that, when we are talking about in the subject of consistency, as part of the requirement, are we getting to the point where we are saying that we absolutely need strong consistency?
For some of our data, it seems like we're saying we need strong consistency. Not all of it, but at least some of it.
But that's still a guess, right? I mean, we have to try it out. Isn't that right? We have to
No.
test it.
That's not
No,
how
you're
this
sure of it?
should work.
I'm certain that we
No,
need
what I'm
strong
suggesting is the issue. I'm suggesting that the way to find this out isn't, hey, let's try it and see if it works. The way is to understand how we use our data.
Okay, fine. But the understanding, at the same time, you're saying that if it's the same node that you're talking to, then the strong consistency isn't an issue.
No, you've got strong consistency still there. Your data access pattern is what I'm talking about, not the data store.
Yeah,
Your data access pattern requires strong consistency.
So that's a requirement. We just need to mark it as a requirement, irrespective of the data store.
Does anybody
Actually,
know? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, actually what we are looking is we want a fast enough database and also a strong, consistent database at the same time, which is impossible, right? Everybody wants that.
Yeah. And again, the part of the issue is, it's not all our data that needs to be strongly consistent. From what I've gathered from this conversation, there are key aspects or key parts of our data or key use cases around our data that require strong consistency, but not every use case requires strong consistency.
Right.
And so again, back to the other point down there, it's perfectly reasonable to say, you know what, in certain situations, we're going to require strong consistency. There's ways to get that. It might be that for those things that we require strong consistency, we use a different data store, right? Versus those things that for weak consistency or eventual consistency, we require something else. So the question is, where we're allocating these IDs, these unique IDs, and using the database for that, is that our performance bottleneck? And if not, then maybe we can use a strongly consistent data model or database for that capability. Where we're running into performance issues, maybe we don't need strong consistency there, and we can use an eventual consistent model and get the performance, i.e. right data store for the right data. Now that means a little more complexity around deployment, potentially, but it's something to think about.
Yeah. If we put such a requirement, then probably we need to re-architecture some of the vOLTHA code that we are using right now. For example, we may put a different resource manager, different resource manager component that requires a consistent database, and the other parts of the vOLTHA uses a eventual consistent database. Probably we would need to re-architecture.
That may be true. That may be the right direction. I don't know.
It's a long way.
I am.
I agree. I agree.
I'm not sure going with two databases could be the right choice, and maybe for the time being we would have to take a trade-off and say that if this happens, we try and do some reconciliation, but if we don't, we just reprovision the ONUs, and that's it. For example, I'm just picking an example.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. But again, we need to know where those trade-offs are going to be. And again, that's why we need to understand the data use model.
And it's very common in this stateful case, because many of these containers are stateful, for each service to have their own database attached to them. That's also common.
Yeah, true.
Ken, does read-write code does not have any necessity of strong consistency? And there's
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, does the read-write core does not have any requirement for strong consistency? I'm just trying to evaluate if it's just the adapter that needs this.
In the case of a read-write core, it's a write-through cache.
Mm-hmm.
So if the database goes down, so everything is again in memory. If the read-write core goes down, and let's assume that we were writing like let's say some ports to the database, and during that time that data was gone because of eventual consistency. The moment we reload everything in memory, well, that data will be absent, right? And then any action that would be relevant from that port, for example, if you're sending flows, stuff like that, that would fail. But it won't have the same impact that in your case where you're sending, you have two the same alloc IDs being associated with different devices, for example. The impact is not the same.
Okay.
But
I think the key there is it's a read through cache, right?
Yeah.
And so where data can go wonky is after the client makes a write to the loader, the cache, and then you would need kind of a multiple failure scenario for things to really break.
Yeah, in the case that if we take this simple example of adding a port, so in the core, we say, oh, let's add this port, it's in the cache, and let's say immediately after that, the core goes down, that data never made it to a database. So when we come back up, we read everything from the database, then that port will be missing. But it's not as big of an impact because flows and everything will come down. You automatically see that this port is missing. There will be an alarm or an error raised for that.
Yeah, but how do you recover from that? I mean, that port never gets added.
In this case, how do you cover?
I meant to say the port never gets added to the HCD or any KV store for that matter.
Yeah, it won't be added in this scenario.
And you raise an alarm, and the only way to recover that is probably, you know, just delete that device and re-add or something like that, right?
Yes, because we don't have a retry mechanism on the the OLT will not retry to add ports, right? So that's the only way to go around that.
Okay, I think the adapter is trying to solve a problem that, I mean, from what I understand, what we tried to do in the adapter was, you know, to not have, we don't raise the alarm, first of all, and we try to ensure that this data is not lost at all. I mean, there is no use case where we, you know, have to delete the OLT or reboot the OLT or any such thing.
That sounds like a use case for strong consistency then.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are going to be trade-offs, right? If you have strong consistency, you can take advantage of that. If you don't, then yeah, you're going to have some scenarios that you have to deal with unexpected consequences.
But it's still in this use case of port adding, you still will get to a point where the data doesn't even make it to a database, and the code just died. So there is still like room, very small window, where irrespective of the database, that data could be lost.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying if the client makes the call to a library that eventually writes to a database, if things crash between
Like
their
Mhm.
things that before the database write is complete,
Mhm.
yeah, there's a failure. Always a window.
Yeah, and on top of that, we can even get like in the other case where an adapter send a request is add these ports, and the call say, yeah, cool, I'll add it. And even before it's added, it crashed. And that data get lost.
So Girish, if at all the same value is repeated, for example, the same Gemport ID is getting allocated or the same alloc ID is getting allocated, would we get any errors from the BAL layer when we try to provision those?
Yeah.
Okay, so some things will fail for that ONU, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe the flow provisioning.
Yeah.
Okay. So that can be taken as a hint, right? So if something fails, we can release the ONU when it comes back again.
Yes, that could be used. Yeah, but there are, the adapter also could use some enhancement. I don't think we handle all of these failures currently well. I mean, in terms of releasing the ONU and such. I mean, we throw an error and just proceed. And that ONU is just lingering there until, you know, someone from the northbound goes ahead and clears this ONU forcefully.
I think even that should be fine for now, as long as someone in the system is intimated that, okay, this thing didn't work through. So, okay, for now, maybe the expectation is that northbound system should take care of it. So if there is an event going out or whatever, right? So at least what I'm trying to say is there could be a recovery, right? If at all we land in that situation.
Yes, yes, but my only concern is we shouldn't land in these problems too often due to some problems with the database that we have chosen.
Yeah, but with the right-through approach that Ken is talking about, right? What my understanding is we would get into this kind of a problem only when both the adapter as well as the database master through which the writes are happening, both of them go down at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not all, not 100% the case. You can also have a case where you're in the process of doing something in the adapter or in the core, and that it just dies. With the database still there, except that data never make it to the database.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So the data was not yet flushed to the DB.
Yeah, so we
Or
don't
both
have
of
a
them.
lot of retry mechanism or a refresh scenarios. Like for example, between ONOS and the core, if there's any flows missing, there is this refresh mechanism that happen. But we don't have that between the core and the adapters between the devices. So there is not a lot of different ways of recover unless we have those kind of mechanisms in place.
Okay, so maybe let's do this. I know Circuit has some initial patch for Redis support within vOLTHA. We could take a look at that one and see where it leads us. I also know that it is backwards compatible, so it doesn't kill the current existing etcd work. Circuit, do you want to say a few things about that?
Yeah, I also need to push two other patches for OpenVOLTHA adapter, RW core, and also ONU adapter, and also the hand chart change, of course.
Yep.
And also, I don't have a vOLTHA implementation for Redis. That is something else we need to probably the ONF tests are based on the vOLTHA. So yeah, we may need that also at the same time. So I plan to complete all of these in this week.
Okay.
I hope we can start testing next week at the ONF lab.
Okay.
Also, I mentioned in the Slack that the study code check fails because when I include the Redis clients, it also bumped up the vOLTHA protos, not vOLTHA protos. The Google protos version, but we have some problems with that because right now what we are using it seems it is deprecated. So I couldn't able to update the Google Proto packages right now. So the Redis test, automated test will fail right now. We'll try to fix that later. I tried to bump up the version of Google Protos, but then later I had different errors. Also, I put those errors into the Slack.
Yeah, thanks, Circuit, for that. Yeah, at the moment, I really don't know that. I will have to look into it, but I mean, if your patch works, it's probably good enough to build a few images and do a few tests before we take it any further. Any questions for Circuit about his implementation work?
So probably last week I mentioned that I was able to complete running the Redis as one master instance of Redis and two slaves instances of Redis, and I was able to see if I kill the master pod, then the slave once becomes the master, and the other pods was able to connect those master. And there was no problem with that. But what I need to test is what you said. I'll restart the master pod while in provisioning the ONUs and also while provisioning the flows. And I hope I can see some anomalies in the BBSIM logs if something happens.
Okay. Yeah, you keep us updated, Serkant. I'll keep it in the
Sure.
TST for the next meeting. And we'll check. Another idea that I just had is that we could possibly also...
Excuse me, Andrea, just one thing. Serkant, I'm building some validation in BBSIM so that will throw allowed error if we duplicate the gem ports or the allocation ID or the ONU ID. That should be helpful for your testing. I'll send it your way as soon as I'm done.
Okay, great.
Another idea I had is that based on the document that David put together, I might reach out to Jordan, to NF. He's the guy behind Atomics. He might have some better insights on a few of the things we discussed today and a few of the maybe possible workarounds. So I'll maybe keep you guys posted on that as well. Okay, given that we are at the top of the hour, any other topics that you guys would like to briefly discuss or that I need to take into account for the next meetings?
No, we have not even done first point of David's document.
Sorry, what?
We have not completed the first point of David's document, so I think there's a long way to go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I'll keep it on the agenda, and we'll see. Okay, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you next week then. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.